Maybe he had an unruly servant. Maybe he was going to have to go home and deal with that servant in some way. Probably had a lot on his mind. Just the typical, normal stuff of life. And perhaps Stephanas had heard of Paul and Silas. Maybe they'd heard about the uproar. Maybe as he was walking through the marketplace one day, he heard this female voice, kind of in a strange, raspy voice, say, "These are the servants of the Most High God. They're telling you how to be saved." But this day, when he went into work, these two men were delivered to him. Stephanas, they said, the cops off the beat, said, "Take care of this guy." The magistrates said, "Take care of these men." And they were all bloody and they were dirty and they'd been beaten. They thought, and you know, what's a good jailer to do? You think that they're bringing you that somebody looks like this? They must be the scum of the earth. And so he took them into the inner cell, locked them up, and chained them. What had they done? Well, the arrest warrant said that they were advocating customs unlawful for Romans to accept or practice. Well, then the afternoon wore on into evening, wore on to late into evening, and yeah, maybe it was warm that day. Maybe Stephanas was kind of drowsy. Maybe he hadn't slept too well the day before. Maybe his sleep had been interrupted by the sick child. Who knows? All kinds of things. And then it happened. Now, it wasn't too strange for the ground to start shaking in that part of the country, because it always does. It's kind of like living in California. There's just earthquakes. But this one was particularly strong. And the walls began to shake, and and perhaps some of the plaster began to fall off the ceiling, and maybe the little lamp that was sitting on the table was starting to scoot its way over to the edge of the table, getting ready to fall off. And all of a sudden, Stephanas woke up. And he looked, and the doors of the jail's cells were open. He thought, "Oh man, they're all gone. I am a dead man. I literally am a dead man." Because you see, commonly, the punishment for losing prisoners was execution. And so he decided, "I'm going to save my family the embarrassment, and I'm just going to take care of this myself." And so he withdrew his sword, and he pointed at himself, and it was ready. And all of a sudden, out of the darkness, this voice read, "Hey, stop! Don't do that! We're all here!" It says he went in trembling and brought them out, fell on his knees and said, "What must I do to be saved?" That was a strange question. Really, it was. It's a good question. It's the question we all need to be asking. But at that moment, at that time, it was a bit of a strange question. The answer was, believe in Jesus. Had he heard the singing? Was that why he automatically talked in this way? Maybe he had realized that this event was the work of some kind of an awesome being, a powerful God, more powerful than any God he'd ever heard of before. Because, the power of God is an effective witness. Well, this was certainly more than a typical night's work. And so he said, "What must I do to be saved?" And the answer was, believe in Jesus. And so he took them and he washed their wounds. He probably put ointment on them and took care of them and took them home for a meal. Now think about his wife's reaction. "I got broken dishes all over the house. The walls are cracked. The kids are scared. And you're bringing prisoners home for a meal in the middle of the night? What's the matter with you?" I can see her saying that. But nevertheless, there they were. Let me point out some things. He had experienced a crisis. His job, his family, his life were on the line. This man was in a crisis. Everything he knew immediately had been changed. Within the space of 30 seconds maybe, or a minute at most, everything he knew was upside down. It happens that way, doesn't it? When I was back in Princeton, Illinois, pastoring there, I drove school bus, and there was another school bus driver who was older than me. He was probably, I was 30, 35, something like that. He was probably close to 60, maybe a little over 60. And he had been a truck driver. He had driven tanker trucks. And one night, or one day, one night, whatever, he was walking around his truck expecting the tires and all the stuff that truck drivers do before they get going. And he slipped on a patch of ice, fell on his back, and that was the end of his trucking career. That quick. He lived in pain and treatment and therapy the rest of his life. That fast, his life had been changed. And so it was with Stephanus, our jailer. Everything was on the line immediately. Now, most time we think we can handle things that come along, don't we? We're pretty good at that. Yeah, I can take this. I can take that. Yeah, throw me a little curve here and there. Throw me a little sickness. Throw me a little, job uncertainty. Throw me a little whatever. Yeah, I can take care of it. Because, I'm a man. Or I'm a woman. Hear me roar. I can take care of it. I can take care of it. But sometimes crises often send us to something, or most of the time someone greater than ourselves sends us to God. 9/11. Hundreds and thousands of people fled to churches to pray because they didn't know what was going on. None of us did. We stuck up this ugly homemade sign out here in front. Said, stop and pray if you want to. And we turned the air conditioner on and opened the doors and let people come in and pray. There was that much uncertainty. And I know of people who testify that that's when they came to faith in Christ was as a result of that day, of that event. Crises generally drive us to something greater than ourselves. Now, it doesn't have to be a traumatic crisis. It can be a little crisis. Now, when you're in the middle of a crisis, it's big. It doesn't matter what it is, it's big. I mean, you cut your finger, it's a crisis. It's big. Because it's my finger and it hurts. You have a hangnail, it's my thumb, it hurts. And so, every crisis is a big deal when we're going through it, isn't it? I was talking to my son, Andrew, a few weeks ago on the phone. And in 2004, we sold him our 1997 Ford Contour. Had 108,000 miles on it. And we thought, well, you know what? So we tried to sell it here. Nobody would buy it. So I unloaded. I sold it to my son. There was nothing wrong with it. The air conditioning didn't work. And that was the only thing that I knew was wrong with it. And so he said, yeah, sure. So we sold it to him at a very, 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 very reasonable price. And if you've ever sold your kid a car, you know what I mean. It was a very reasonable price. We didn't give it to him, but it was a very reasonable price. Well, a few months later, the transmission went out. And he didn't know what to do. Should he take on the debt of buying another one? Or should he fix the transmission and make payments to fix the transmission? What should he do? He asked me, this was back in 2005, years ago, he asked me, his in-laws, and he was just doing everything he could to get advice for it. And so he finally came to the conclusion, and I was advocating one thing, actually I was advocating one thing, and his in-laws, where he lives, were advocating another. That's kind of an interesting situation. Well, he took my advice. Well, not just my advice, but he did what I thought he probably should have done, and he fixed the transmission. And the car ran for another 60,000 miles. But there's a little more to that story. And this is what came out a few weeks ago. Well, for one thing, the transmission went bad again. And so this time he went ahead and purchased another car. But he said, Dad, before I saw that car, I want to take a picture of it. I said, well, why do you want a picture of it? I mean, it's a pretty car. It always has been. It's been my wife's favorite car. It's still her favorite car. After all these years, it's still her favorite car. And he said, well, remember when the transmission went out? I said, yeah. He said, I asked God to help me decide what to do.